All right, this podcast is powered by Royal Adjusting. If you're a new, aspiring, or veteran property adjuster, head over to royaladjusting.com and join their roster for work opportunities. Hey, IAs, and welcome to the new Adjuster Talk podcast by IAPath. I'm your host, Chris Stanley, and I'm joined by the founder of this podcast and my co-host, Jason Heenan. Now, each week, our goal is to bring a panel together and talk about the big questions and topics that independent adjusters face when getting started and when you're growing your career. Jason, welcome to episode 1, if we want to call it that, of the new Adjuster Talk podcast. It's so hard. I want to say the other podcast name. Thanks for being here today.
Wow, Chris, thanks for the great introduction. It's so fun. Really looking forward to this project and sharing what we know.
And I'm excited for the new format. And so for the listener or the viewer who's tuning in, just know this is going to kind of be a fast-paced podcast. We want to keep every episode under 30 minutes, if at all possible. So that way you can get a topic succinctly answered by several different experts in a short amount of time. So if you're ready, we're going to jump into episode 1 here. How much money does an IA need before getting started and why? So that's the question we're going to tackle today. But before we can actually tackle that, we need to introduce our guest. We are joined by Brad Fancher. So Brad, I want to give you a few minutes to explain who you are, why in the heck we would bring you on this show, so maybe people will actually pay attention to you when you talk. Brad, go ahead. Give yourself an introduction.
Well, thank you, Chris. So I'm here today. I'm right at 3.5 years into the whole independent adjuster world. I'm currently working as an auto light truck, heavy equipment damage appraiser or adjuster. I came into the industry thinking I was going to do property. I built houses for years, 15 years with my dad, and then on my own as a general contractor. And then one day I picked up a book written by Chris Stanley, and the rest is history. I'm now in the auto world, and I now not only do daily independent, daily claims, but I'm also part of the team at IAPath as an instructor and a mentor. I love that. That's my passion. I love helping people. I love encouraging people, and so those are just a few reasons that I'm here today.
And Brad's a pastor in a previous life, still a pastor, once a pastor, always a pastor, but he likes to talk. So you're going to hear me cut him off. I'm going to cut Jason off a lot. I'm going to cut myself off a lot because we have a strict time schedule to keep. But Brad's the instructor at IAPath for auto and heavy equipment. So the dude knows his stuff. He's very diverse. He obviously has a lot of experience in construction. I thought he brought a good balance to Jason, who's been in property for a long time, and myself, who's only been in auto and really focused on the career side. So I'm excited to jump into our icebreaker question. So each episode, viewer, we are going to have an icebreaker question and the main topic, because I think there's a lot of great stories our panelists can bring, myself, Jason, Brad, in this episode. And so, guys, starting off with Jason, here's the question for you. What is the brokest moment you've had while being an IA?
Oh man, Chris, there's so many times, especially at the beginning of the career. At the beginning of any career, it seems like you should be no stranger to being broke. It's never easy. So let me zoom out for a second before we jump into the question and just say, whenever you are getting into something new, you just need to set the expectations of the first year is going to be more challenging and different, just because you have to learn and do different things. You have to change your lifestyle, probably who you hang out with, and just your daily habits. So the first year is never good. Second point before I answer the question is this. I don't know of a business that is cheaper to get into. If you train, have a laptop, your startup costs are really just your ladder, your laptop, your regular fields, your field equipment that you need to tape, measure, disto, whatever you choose to do. And you can do it can be light. There's not a better career to get started on, is what I'm saying. So the answer is I was broke when I got started, no doubt about it. And the brokest I was in 2006. I released myself, which was a mistake, from a Hurricane Rita in 2005 and took 3.5 months off. Was listening to all the wrong people about how the career, 6 months on and 6 months off. Well, that all works well as long as you save money. I, of course, love to spend money. So was super duper broke, living in Texas, had not worked in 3.5 months, was on unemployment and searching, and got the call that in 2006 to go to Seattle. And the car broke down, wouldn't you know it, on about the 5th inspection, and the whole motor had to be replaced. So I had to borrow money from 2 different people, 1 to get the automobile, the motor replaced, and 2 to afford the motel room just until the following payday. It was a pretty scary time. And I can tell you that had that storm not happened, which is how it always seems it would go, I don't think financially it would have been good from there. So that is my story.
And that's awesome. That's a good story. All right, Brad, good luck following that up. Brad, what's your brokest moment in being an IA?
Man, Jason set the bar pretty high. Well, honestly, I have not yet had a broke moment. My way into the industry, is pretty unique. Maybe we'll get into that later. But yeah, I haven't had a broke moment yet. There's been some slim moments, when you first get started, which, is like Jason said, that's just part of it. But a lot of moments where I was battling fear, fear of not having enough, fear of gosh, that's probably still there even after 3.5 years. Just, am I doing a good job? There's things unique in this industry. A lot of times they don't, care. Firms don't really, they don't really talk to you unless you're doing a bad job. So, occasionally they'll reach out, but yeah, just a lot of scary moments, I guess. And maybe I created them in my mind. But thankfully I haven't been broke yet. So.
Well, you were very, very fortunate. And I think other people want to know how in the world you haven't had a broke moment. And like you said, maybe you can incorporate that into later, your money getting started. Sure. So I'll go ahead now. If I could just pick one moment, that'd be amazing. But I've been broke a lot. Being an I am quite the opposite of Brad Fancher. But there's really 2 times that I feel like were the brokest moments I ever had. One was 9 years ago. I posted on LinkedIn yesterday because I was thinking about this episode coming up. 9 years ago, my wife and I and our 4-year-old at the time were sleeping in a tent in Harvey, Louisiana for a hailstorm. We couldn't afford a hotel, so we were sleeping in a tent at a campground, luckily. So we had showers and all that. The CEO of the company that had hired us was worried with my boss, like, well, he's running our whole shop. I got a promotion while I was there. And he's sleeping in a tent. Like, does he shower? Like, well, what are you doing? Like, why are you promoting this guy? And so that was one really, really broke moment where we really couldn't afford it. And we did get a hotel for a few nights because it was supposed to hail. There were cockroaches everywhere, and we slept with the lights on. It was that bad. And then the other one was the day, a little later that year, the day my son was born, June 14th, 9 years ago. The company, that same company, collapsed, disappeared, took everybody's money that they owed for payroll for months back. And I had $212, if I am scarred the right way and remembering that number, something like that, $200 in the bank with a newborn that was literally born that morning. Our pay check didn't come out, and I found out that morning is gone. So that's my brokest 2 IA moments. There was another time we had to borrow money from a crooked lender through the internet, like one of those paycheck advance things, done that before. So I've had a lot.
How'd you guys get that on track?
That's a whole nother story, Jason. I ain't got time for it. I got to keep you on track. I got to keep you on track. That's a whole another story for another day. Or Brad said on LinkedIn, it's a book. Well, you need that in a book or something.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, we're going to transition now. So now you guys hear that we know what we're talking about to some extent about being broke and money. And we've been through it. We've been through the gamut between the 3 of us. And so the real question today that we want to answer for you is, how much money does an IA need before getting started? And why? I think the why is really important too. So we're going to start off with Brad. I'm going to start with you since we let Jason go first last time, and go ahead and share how much money you think an IA needs to get started and why.
Sure. Well, that's an awesome question. I think, of course, I'm coming from an auto side. Jason will hit the property side for sure. But I think, first of all, it has a lot to do with, where you're at personally as far as your income, what you feel like you need, number one. But remember, you're launching a business. You're not just launching, you're not going to work for someone. You're launching a career. But you are birthing a business. And so you have to think through startup costs. But like Jason said, you don't have brick and mortar. You don't have to deal with a lot of those things. The vehicle you're already driving becomes your company vehicle, thankfully. But I mean, if you're wanting some peace of mind, some security so that you can get out there and actually focus on building your business rather than paying the bills, which will zap a lot of energy out of you. I think, it would be ideal to have at least the first month's income, apart from business expenses set aside, if not 2 months. But you've got to think through your software. All of us as adjusters, we're using software. It's the most important tool we have. And then Jason alluded to it, your tools, of course, property guys and gals, they're a little bit different than us in auto, but still we have tools that we use. Fuel cost, especially right now, you got to think about, think that through, especially if you're going to cover a large territory. So I think it's really wise to have, and again, it has everything to do with your income. But I mean, 6,000 for a month, 6 to 7,000. So if we're talking 2 months, a good 14, 15,000. And I've seen people do that, work, just doing 2 or 3 dailies while they're working a full-time job, saving up that money to where they can, finally launch, full-time, if you will. So, I mean, if we're putting a dollar figure to it, that's what I'm going to encourage people to do. Obviously, you can do it for less than that. You can jump in and you're in survival mode at that moment. But, we're talking thriving or surviving here. So, I'm going to encourage people to go more towards that $14,000, $15,000. So.
Wow. Yeah, I wish I had done that. I wouldn't have had those 3 broke moments, is my guess. I probably would have found a way to have a broke moment again. But all right, Jason, good one, Brad. I really like that. Thank you. Jason, what say you? How much does an IA need to get started and why?
All right. That was a great answer, Brad. That was a really super great answer. And the number Brad gave out to me is a best case scenario, right? As a guest, 95% of listeners aren't going to have that type of fund sitting there ready. I know I did not. I had about $2,500 in debt sitting there ready whenever I took my first deployment. So the answer is this. If you have a vehicle and a laptop and a camera, which most people do through their phone, you have most of your expenses already covered. Okay, now there may be some modifications you need to do to make your setup more professional. But in a best case scenario, I wrote down, now this doesn't, so when Brad included his number, he was including a number to take care of, a few things at home, like a reserve you'd want to do to take care of your power bill, to make sure your power was still on. And you maintain good air and your water and your house payment, health insurance, and those type of things that you eventually want to get. But for adjusting itself, if you took out the laptop and the vehicle and just did like a bare bones setup with ladder, tape measure, cougar paws, you got to consider your safety. I think it's very important to consider your safety. Yeah, clipboard. Chris, you're looking at between $1,500 and $3,000 to get just set up with all your equipment. Now you're missing all of your knowledge and you're missing a pending of work to go do. But no doubt about it, $3,000 would definitely get you started in 2022.
I agree. I agree with both you guys. And so the listener is probably going, what in the world? How can you agree with both 14 grand and $3,000 basically? And I would say, depending on what you want to do, how I usually think about this number for students is, what are you going to spend? What's your outlay going to be from the day you raise your hand to say, I want to become an adjuster, to your first year or first successful deployment, either one of those. And if you're going into property, you should expect that overall your outlay is going to be up to $10,000, more on the Brad side of things, as far as what you're going to outlay your first year. That's not in the first month. That's not in the first 2 months or 3 months, but between Xactimate subscriptions, your ladder and everything, you're going to do that. For auto, it's anywhere from 5 to 7 your first year because of CCC1, your training, your licensing and all that. But that's everything. Jason's saying, hey, if you have $3,000 sitting there and you have a license, or maybe you don't even have a license, you're going to inspectors on demand or something, you can jump in and start working. Brad's saying ideally for your household, you got 14. And then I'm saying to launch your whole career in the first year, overall, your outlay is going to be 5 to 7 in auto, up to 10 for property is pretty standard, unless you go with like Veterans Adjusting School, which is almost $20,000 or whatever itself. So basically that would cover the gamut of in 3 very different answers. Now, Brad, I want to come back to you, and I'll come back to you as well, Jason, with something else. But you had mentioned you didn't have any scary moments. And I think the listener is going to want to know how Brad didn't have any scary moments, because I don't think you had 14 grand sitting in the bank when we talked. But if you could share, for a few minutes, just how you were able to avoid those scary moments. And then I'll come back to Jason with a follow-up question as well.
Yeah, well, I've seen, again, I don't think my situation's unique, but it's definitely not the majority of adjusters, the course they take. There are a good number of us who, already have a full-time job, and, a lot of us have the opportunity or privilege to just gradually, start with, again, this is from a daily auto perspective, but, get on with one firm and just, accept, 1 or 2 or 3 or, maybe 10 assignments a week. And so that's how I started. I started with one firm. They knew I was new. Thankfully, they were, willing to work with me as a new appraiser. I'm just so grateful for that, and the job I was working at the time allowed me the freedom to get out, 2 or 3 days a week, or, half days. I just had a lot of freedom to build my schedule around that. And thankfully, I was able to make a shift. There was a transition, over time, to where one day I looked around and I'm doing this full time, and I was able. It was right. It was the right time for me to step in and say, okay, this is it. I'm gonna be doing this full time, and so that's why I've not had too many scary moments. Now, COVID hit as I was, a year and a half or so into my career. That was a scary moment, because there were 2 or 3 weeks there. It was crickets. There was nothing coming in, and I went from this amazing claim load to nothing. That was scary, because, no one was talking. No one was trying to give a forecast of what was headed, what was going to be happening. So scary moment there.
Thanks for sharing that, Brad. I think that's going to help a lot of people have a different perspective, because I think both you have such different experiences, and I love it. That's why we love these panels. Is one is sidestepping in, kind of building it slow and steady. And then Jason, what I want to talk to you about is you kind of jumped in with both feet, no money. So that first storm, I think you said it was Rita, and you cut yourself off early. So can you walk us through high level, or even details if you want, of like, okay, what was that first storm like monetarily wise, as far as costs and what you earned, how long, and then why'd you cut yourself off and take yourself home? What was going on there?
All right, Chris. The first thing is, this was 17 years ago, and you have to keep in perspective the type of decision maker a 24 or 25-year-old would be in that type of situation. So you can't judge me as I am now based on some of the poor decision making that may have happened back then. But not all starts are pretty starts. So
no, and we just want to help others' starts be better than ours. Maybe that's the hope.
Okay, so in a nutshell, I went to a little tiny farm school in Arkansas to get an undergraduate degree, and one of my buddies worked for Pilot, and he got me set up. He wanted me to come over for Katrina, and the plot of the story is I'm living in Phoenix, Arizona. Knew I wanted to be an independent property adjuster because I had seen, some of the wealth that had been built over time by people who had been independent adjusting. And so they call for Katrina. I'm working as a staff adjuster for Nationwide. They trained me for a year and I handled claims for them. And then it was just too good of a situation back in 2005. We had something like it in 2017, 2012. Maybe it's 2022. We'll also have a hurricane season like this, but it was just a very inviting hurricane season for new adjusters and new, people wanting to go out and make a name for themselves and change the way they're doing business. So get out to Hurricane Rita in October of 2005 and was asked to be put on day rate. So I leave an apartment, have very little money, have a little single cab pickup truck, load up pretty much everything I need, which is at the time, a 16-foot ladder cost $59 at Walmart, and a digital camera, not very many megapixels. It wasn't very expensive, and drove over there, got busy on Rita, and almost immediately there was a need for cleanup or day rate. So for those of you who don't know what day rate is, you either make money in the property side by working on a per claim basis or a per day basis. And that's what per diem is. They moved me to a day rate or a per diem the following October. And so at the beginning of a storm, typically there's a huge wave of money and production and sleeplessness and stress. And, that happened just because I was new, but there wasn't a big wave of money. So whenever I saw the opportunity to go on day rate, I thought, man, that looks like a sure thing, which is what I was used to because I had a salary. And in the middle of August, 10 months later, it just seemed like it was time. I didn't understand that not every year had 3 or 4 category 3+ hurricanes hit, major metropolitan areas. I just thought that hurricanes came in from June to the end of November, so on and so forth. So I cut myself off and told them I didn't want to work anymore, and I'd hit them on the next hurricane. Of course, that didn't come, and that was one of many hard and heavy lessons.
So what did you end up spending, and what were you making per day at that time? What was the kind of per day rate that you were able to make?
It was, Chris, it was about $400 before.
Okay.
Before,
But I mean, it's consistent income across 10 months. That's huge. You're doing good. That's awesome.
It was enough to go buy a small camper and get out of the hotel room, and then to literally work my way up from there.
But you got a ton of experience because of that. You probably learned the claim process through and through that way, which was, you saw a lot of aftermath of the storm versus just the front end. That's awesome.
Yeah,
all right,
everything.
Well, we are going to wrap up this episode. So everyone, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope that you have a better understanding of, how much money you might really need to get started as an IA and why. We'd love it if you enjoyed this episode to leave a review on iTunes, to share it on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you spend your time on social media. And look forward to visiting with you guys next week. So keep walking your path and claiming your life. And I'll be joined with Brad and Jason here in the next episode.